Welcome to the interview presented by Alabama Wrestling Forums. I'm Jackson Bass, here with former Edinboro wrestler, along with assistant coach at Mae Jemison High School, Arick Shankles. How you doing today, Coach?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. So let me start out by asking you, what got you into wrestling?
Well, I actually started wrestling when I was probably like 3 or 4. I want to say that my big brother, who's 5 years older than me, he started wrestling when he was like in middle school-ish. And so he was going to practice all the time. And so I kind of just hopped on the mat right after he started, around that time. And then I kind of just fell in love with it. It was just something I did, I guess, forever. But I was doing a bunch of other sports too. It wasn't like I was just wrestling for the longest time. I think that's how most kids are. You know, you try a bunch of different sports, but as other people kept growing, I kind of stayed the same. So I kind of got hooked on wrestling because it's individual. You know, you're separated by weight class, and when your classmates are growing and you're staying the same all these years, then it's just one of those sports that kind of stuck around with, and I was all right at it. So
obviously you had an older brother in the sport, Tyler Shankles.
Mm-hmm.
He wrestled at Cumberland University. How did having an older brother in the sport kind of benefit your wrestling?
Well, I mean, he used to beat the crap out of me all the time. I mean, we had a mat in the garage, and I remember crying many times because he would just whoop up on me. And, I mean, I think it helps you, pave the way if you have an older brother in a sense, because I had someone he was the state champion when I was in middle school, and so I was able to kind of follow his career and saw what it took to get to that level. And you being brothers, you always want to one up each other. And so it was one of those things where if he's going to be successful, like I want to be even more successful. So in a way, I think it was probably the best thing for me to have somebody kind of go before me that was kind of able to look at his success and what he was doing and kind of try to replicate that. And I think we did a pretty good job.
Definitely. So where'd you start out wrestling youth?
I wrestled youth for both Scottsboro Youth Wrestling Club, and I think before that, it was around the same time because I was kind of a kid that would travel a lot. We would travel to multiple different places. I think I started mostly one of my first memories is with Scott Jennings at UWC in Huntsville. I remember going to Huntsville and driving a lot to Huntsville and kind of practicing over there with a bunch of different people and kind of growing over there. So I would say Scott was probably my first coach that I remember being coached by. But I mean, obviously Coach Draskovic over at Scottsboro Youth Wrestling, that was somebody who I stuck with for much of my youth career. And I mean, if you look at that club, there was a bunch of different kids from that time period that we all kind of stuck together and we were pretty good. I mean, we were pretty good for youth wrestling, I'd say.
How did those coaches kind of give you a solid foundation into your wrestling?
I think coaching is obviously, I mean, being a coach, it's like the most important thing, right, is to have good coaches. If you don't have coaches that know what they're talking about, or even if they don't know what they're talking about, the people that can motivate you to kind of get better, if you don't have that kind of support system, then you're not going to be as successful, right? And so having people like Scott, like JP, I mean, I can go through all the coaches that coached me in youth and all the way up to college. I mean, they're just so impactful. And like I said, me being someone who traveled around a lot, I was able to kind of be mentored by a bunch of great coaches. I mean, so people like Rod, people like Jake, Coach Hatcher up at UTC was super impactful. And then obviously Coach Flynn and Coach Hill up at college. I mean, I've just been around really good coaches my entire life. And a lot of that is, I think, my parents being willing to drive me to these places and me wanting to kind of get better. And then a lot of it is also just having access to those higher level coaches that kind of have been there, they've done it, and then they want to give back. I think that's super important.
So obviously you started your career at Scottsboro High School under Coach Staten. What did he kind of do to kind of start off your career in high school?
Well, I mean, when I was growing up, so my big brother wrestled in high school, I want to say 2008 to 2011 or something like that. And that was kind of, in my eyes at the time as a middle schooler, that was kind of the golden era of Alabama wrestling. You know, you had Tanner Moon, you had Stephen West, you had all these people at that time that were being so successful, not just in Alabama, but everywhere else. And so I kind of grew up looking to Coach Staten's championship teams and like really wanting to be that. and Scottsboro's team had won like 4 or 5 in a row. They had the Cuppersons on the team at the time, my older brother, and a bunch of other people that were just super impactful. And so hanging around those people, I think, and not just Coach Staten, who I still, I'm a very good relationship with today. I think just him and that team itself, just seeing the way that they wanted to be successful and how they were accomplishing it was just super impactful on me as a middle schooler at the time, just watching those guys go in and grind every day and kind of want to get better as a team, and then seeing the successes that they had, and being around a team like that from such a young age, I think was just amazing. And then as far as Coach Staten himself, I mean, like, that guy loves wrestling. If you know him or talk to him, I mean, he is all in, and he wants to, a lot of older coaches you see, and I'm not calling him old, but a lot of older coaches, you see kind of be stuck in like this way of thinking and one way of thinking. And he's just a guy that just seeks out wrestling knowledge. And I think you can see in his wrestlers how even his coaching style has kind of evolved and has kind of been updated throughout the years. And I think that's important for coaches as they kind of get older to kind of open their mind a little more to new techniques and new styles of wrestling and maybe new training methods. And so having somebody like that in your corner who's, all in, it's super helpful.
So obviously you moved to Muscle Shoals during high school. Did that move kind of affect your wrestling at all? Or were you able to keep a solid mindset?
I think it definitely affected me a little bit. I think as far as the training goes, like, I was with Coach Hatcher up at UTC, and I was able to practice with 2 wrestlers. You might not know them, but Michael Murphy, he wrestled at Virginia, the University of Virginia, and Johnny Ragsdale, who was a 4-time Georgia State champ. He wrestled at West Virginia. And so going from those training partners, I kind of had to find a new home per se, as far as clubs go. And that's when I kind of got in contact with Rod and Jake at AWC at the time. And so having to travel every Sunday 2.5 hours to practice and stuff, that was a little different training instead of driving, 45 minutes. But as far as the room, I think the room was actually very good at the time. I mean, as Muscle Shoals, I mean, I was on a state championship team at Scottsboro, right? We won in 2012, and then we got runner-up at 2013. So we obviously had a bunch of studs in the room. But when I made that transition to Muscle Shoals, I had the Green brothers, Joe and James. I had, people that necessarily weren't state champions, but really good practice partners. You had like Grayson Beaver, Braden Barnes, a bunch of people at that time that were maybe not as good as the Scottsboro team, but they definitely had the work ethic. And then you put that in with Coach Hassey at Muscle Shoals. And I think the transition was good. It was definitely a different change of scenery. Scottsboro is kind of a country town, and I'd say Muscle Shoals is more of a preppy kind of area. So it was definitely a weird transition for me, but I think it was good in the long run.
So obviously you're a 4-time state champion, and not a lot of people say that. Not a lot of people can say that. So what kind of gave you the confidence to go out there and win it your freshman and your sophomore year, where a lot of kids are just kind of maybe even starting wrestling? Kind of what kind of kept you going?
I think I put in a lot of work between my 8th and 9th grade year. I wrestled varsity my 8th grade year, and a lot of people don't know that. They just think like, oh, you just, won or whatever. Now, I wrestled varsity my 8th grade year, and I actually had a 500 record. I was like 30-30. So I wasn't very successful. I was kind of undersized at the time. And I was like, I lost in the blood rounds of sectionals. So I was really hurt from that. And then it kind of made up my mind like, hey, I'm just going to solely focus on wrestling, and I really want to win, And I think even going into state, I would say like, I don't think I was the top ranked person, that was back when Alabama wrestling forums and everybody were on there and they were going crazy. And, but in that whole time period, I wasn't necessarily the best wrestler, I don't think, in my weight class. I had Nick Cater, I had Kenan Reese, I had a bunch of people in my weight that were very successful and they were really good at the time. So I wouldn't even say that. I would say I wrestled a very good sectional tournament. And I think winning that sectional tournament changed the course of my career. I would say that that kind of brought me the confidence. But leading into sectionals in the state, I didn't think I was the best in the state. I wouldn't even say that I guess I had hoped I would be, but I'd had some close matches, and I hadn't wrestled the guy I would face in the finals at that point in the season yet. So it was kind of unknown where I was going to be at. And I think I kind of just had one good wrestling tournament. And I think that's kind of what happened.
So how did Rod Yaddy and Jake Elkins kind of take your wrestling to the next level?
I think mentally, I think physically, because by the time I started seeing those guys, I was already a two-time state champion. I think that, I'd kind of known the formula for success working with Coach Hatcher and the people at UTC. And then I think mentally, Rod and Jake did a lot for me, traveling up to Virginia Beach, going through those Fargo camps and going through the whirlwind of emotion that we went through. It was something that I think I needed preparing for college. If I don't have that, I probably would have had an even worse college career, I think, because it's very tough, And so mentally, I think that they really pushed us, that whole group of people, and them in the room at the same time, for what it's worth, was some of the best coaching I think you could get at that time in the state, and I just having great minds like that around you. You're just going to get nothing but better.
So the big question, why Edinboro?
I kind of got tricked, I think. I had committed to a Division II college, Northern State. I don't know if you were around the Fargo camp my senior year. Were you there my senior year? You were younger. It was 2014, 2015.
Was it at Spain Park?
It was at Spain Park. I think you were around. Well, that camp, I was burned out. So my senior year, I was kind of done with wrestling. I actually quit wrestling, and Rod kind of forced me to stay in. But I was kind of burned out, and so I was like, let me just go Division II and whatever, and then they actually dropped their program the week before NHSCA's. Yeah, so they dropped their program the week before NHSCA's, and I was like, well, I didn't even plan on really going to senior nationals at the time. I was still training, but I wasn't going, crazy hard. And so then within a week, I had a week to prep for NHSCA's. I make it to the blood round the year before. I had All-American. And then Rod had connections with Cliff Moore, who was the assistant coach at the time. He's still Coach Flynn's assistant at West Virginia. And they said, hey, we'd love for you to come out on a visit. And so I went, and it was springtime. It was beautiful weather. And turns out Edinboro is very cruel in the winter. And so I kind of got tricked into going there. But it's definitely – Edinboro is a special place, man. And, I love Coach Hill. And, I think he's doing a great job. I think that, if you're looking for a college to go where it's just about wrestling and you're not – you don't have to worry about the big, crazy, schools, I think it's a perfect place. It's a perfect little niche place for people to go.
See, I remember your senior year, we were at one of the freestyle events and you were reffing, and then Rod's like, hey, you're up. And you're like, what?
Yeah, dude, they would just throw me in. But that's any coach, I think, and like I said, at the time I was so burned out from wrestling. When you wrestle every day for 3 or 4 years. Since 8th grade, I had been going really hard. I was just kind of like, dude, I'll just kind of wing it, And so, I would say I do regret that a little bit, not kind of taking it as serious later in my career. But, it is what it is. But it was always fun. I loved freestyle and Greco season, so that's my favorite. So those are some good times.
So obviously, you went and you signed an Edinboro under Tim Flynn, who has produced some amazing wrestlers, Mitchell Port, David Habit, AJ Shoup, right? Okay.
Yeah, Shop.
Yeah. Those are some crazy, crazy wrestlers right there. What were you able to pick up from Coach Flynn?
Oh, a lot. You really learn hard. I don't even want to say hard work, because I feel like it understates at that time what we were doing. They had just came off of a 3rd place finish at the NCAAs. My recruiting class was a top 10 recruiting class in the nation. We had, Corbin Myers, Fritz Hayne, Nate Hagan, just a bunch of like big name people. And we were supposed to be, we had Pat Lugo as well. Man, how am I forgetting Lugo? We were just a really good team. And, you know, being in a room like that is unreal, you know, and you don't realize how far the drop off is between Alabama, at least at that time, and other states until you get into a room with people that, you know, might not be state champions in their state and they're kicking your tail, you know, and they're doing it every single day. And so it was just unreal. And then to have practice partners like Sean Russell and all these other people, I mean, it was a whole different environment. And so picking up a lot from like Flynn and Port and them was literally just hard work. And that no matter where you're at and like what skill level you're at, you can become really good if you just focus in and put in the work.
So, you know, you mentioned that Edinboro usually is not a place with a lot of distractions, but something really, you know, something hit while you were there, which was the loss of Coach Flynn. He decided he's going to move to West Virginia. What was that environment like during that major transition?
Man, I think it was interesting because so I didn't wrestle my junior year of college, and that was Flynn's last year. So I didn't wrestle that year. I quit again. So I was kind of done with wrestling again. I had burned out, and I just kind of, you know, I was sitting behind Russell, and me and Russell have a great relationship still, but I was just like, man, like I just don't know, you know, where my career's going as far as that goes. And I was making music at the time, so I was kind of just away from it, right? But Coach Flynn leaving definitely impacted the team. And I think you can still see the impacts of that in terms of where Edinboro is now and where they were. You know, I think it's not that Coach Hill or everybody that's been there has not been doing an excellent job, because I think they have been with the situation they were given. But, you know, like I was saying, we had a top 10 recruiting class. And for I would say, I think we only kept 2 of our starters that next year after Flynn left, or 2 or 3 of them. That was super obviously hurtful to the program. I mean, if you keep all of those people in the same room, I mean, you have Sean Russell, you have Corbin Myers, you have Pat Lugo, you have Dakota Gear, you have Billy Miller, you have all of those people that are nationally ranked wrestlers, All-American, future All-Americans. You know, if you keep all of those people in that same room, you have a top 5 team. You have a, you know, very successful team. And so to lose all of those people at the same time, it definitely was obviously a serious loss for Edinboro's program. But I think we did a good job that next year of kind of picking up the pieces and just understanding the situation, understanding that all those people left. Like, we have a unique opportunity to restart a program in a way.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned like 4 guys right there who were just insane in the NCAA. And to think that somebody like Tim Flynn, who you said was a top 5 coach at the time, I mean, just imagine if John Smith decided he was going to leave Oklahoma State. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what that – I mean, obviously they got Zach Esposito. They've got amazing assistant coaches there, but still.
It was a huge deal. And, you know, I think there were rumors the year before that a couple schools were offering him after he got 3rd at the NCAAs. And I think a lot of people expected him to leave then. Just because, you know, if you get 3rd with a school like Edinboro, that's super small. They don't have, you know, the funding. They don't have typical recruits that you would see. You would expect big programs to offer him. So I'm not necessarily surprised that a coach like him would go to West Virginia as being as successful as he was at a smaller program and kind of test the water with a bigger program. But yeah, no, it definitely hurt Edinboro, I think. But like I said, I think, you know, Coach Hill's done a great job of bringing in talent. I think they have an excellent recruiting class this year as well. I mean, if you can't tell, I'm a huge Edinboro fan. So you know, I think that they do a good job with what they have.
So obviously you mentioned Coach Hill comes in to replace Coach Flynn. What are some of the things that you picked up from Coach Hill later in your career?
Man, I'll tell you what. So I actually didn't even plan on wrestling my senior year either. I went all summer not training. And I think 2 weeks before school started back, because I was starting my graduate program, 2 weeks before we started back, Coach Hill gives me a call, and he's like, hey, I heard you wrestled here. Would you like to come back out? And I was like, I haven't really planned on it. I'm not really in the best of shape. It's been a year and a half, since I stepped on the mat. I don't know how this is going to work out. And he gave me a chance, man. And I think he kind of reignited my fire for wrestling kind of in a way where, man, I can't say enough good things about him, but he taught me a lot. I think he taught me how to be a better man. I think he taught me how to, be a team player and not focus on myself as much, trying to be more selfless. Cause I think I was a very selfish person going into college. I mean, cause when you're focused as a high school athlete, it's not really about everybody else. You're focused on your career, you getting into college, you doing this. And I think Coach Hill definitely allowed me a different perspective on wrestling. And just, like I said, I can't say enough good things about that guy. I talked to him on the phone a week or two ago. I mean, he's awesome.
So obviously you finished up your schooling at Edinboro and you decided you're going to come back to Alabama. So why'd you decide you're going to go to Mae Jemison?
A lot of it is I wanted to move back towards home. I had contemplated staying up in Pennsylvania and working up there and coaching up there, but it just didn't really work out. It's very hard to get, teaching jobs up there. So end up moving back home and, I kind of wanted to stay in North Alabama. I know a lot of schools I had kind of talked to about maybe trying to get on board with. And it just didn't really ever work out, and that's how with COVID, things were just so different, that maybe those normal opportunities that you would get didn't really work out. And so I ended up at Jemison after, all summer of kind of debating on where I'd want to be at. And man, I love it. It's one of those programs that's also rebuilding. So I kind of feel like it's another Edinboro situation where you have a chance to come in and make an impact on kids that normally you wouldn't have a chance to make an impact on. And kind of how you said before, all of those kids, they don't start wrestling until, middle school, high school. So, you have to do a lot more in a shorter amount of time. And I think it's a challenge. I think it's one of those things where it's just a cool place to be at, and then you add in the baseball coach side of things. And I got to do something that I'm not necessarily comfortable with and pushing my boundaries. And I think it just helped me out a lot. I think Jemison's been a great place for me to be at.
So what are your keys to success as a coach?
I think just getting the kids to buy into what you're preaching. I think a lot of coaches are almost out of touch. I think with, wrestling now, I don't want to say wrestling as a whole, but I think I have a bunch of different thoughts on training and everything else, but I think just getting the kids to buy into what you're preaching, whatever that may be, and kind of trying to get them to understand that they have to take a hold of their careers. Right. And so just getting them to buy in and kind of put the work in and get better at all the little small things that they might've been missing. And then also just treating them all as individuals and understanding that, this kid may have a really great high crotch, but he needs to work on a single leg, or this kid needs to work on a stand-up because he's not very good on bottom or whatever it may be. And you have to just know your athletes and know when to push them, when to pull back, when should we be going over technique more, when is it grind time, and everything in between. I think there's obviously coaching is almost an impossible job, right? But it's super, super interesting, all the different ways you can go.
So you mentioned that you coach baseball. Is there a lot of translation between the two when coaching wise, or?
No, not at all, actually. The only thing that stays, I think, is just the mentality, right? And I think that if you bring a mentality like wrestling, where you're these tough kids, these kids that are just going to go to battle every day, and you bring that into a baseball environment, which is more usually relaxed, I would say, and you bring that mentality in. And get those kids to buy into that, I think that's the only thing that really translated. As far as the technique, it's just completely different. Even the lifting is completely different, right? In wrestling, you're doing a bunch of pulling. In baseball, you're doing a bunch of pushing and rotational stuff. So it's a bunch of different training stuff. Yeah, for sure.
So I've got a segment on my show called The Weigh-In where I have coaches and athletes kind of weigh in on the hot topics that are going on in Alabama. So the first one I'm going to ask you is, do you think wrestling in Alabama should be one division or multiple divisions? And if multiple divisions, how do you say we split it up?
I want to take credit for this conversation, but I'd say I was one of the very first people to even make a post about this. I think like my senior year or maybe my first year of college, I made a post saying that Alabama should be one division. And I think that kind of got a lot of people upset with me. But at the same time, I think now with the introduction of the state duels, right? And I think this is where coaches need to kind of look at this is like we have this avenue for our teams to be crowned champions, right? And you could split that up into 7 divisions if you want, right? 1A, 2A, 3, whatever it may be, treat it just like every other sport. And that's your team state title. And I think for one classification for individual state title is the way that we should go, right? Because I think most coaches and teams and older people, traditional people are more worried about how is my team going to do at this individual tournament, right? And so in my opinion, right, I think that the individual tournament should not have a team race on it. You should take away the team points and let it be about the individuals, right? And not only does that promote competition, but it just overall, I think it would just allow for better recruiting. There's just and this is coming from a small school, right? We only had 9 wrestlers. This would not necessarily help my team, right? But at the same time, we don't crown 4 world champions. We don't crown 4 Olympic champions at a weight, right? So in my opinion, it doesn't make sense why we would crown 3 or 4 state champions, and I've said this before to people that are close to me. I would trade my 4 state titles for 1 all division state title, right? Because who cares how many you win, right? It's the fact that you did it. And putting more weight on that, I think it would be better overall. Like I said, I think more coaches are worried about we didn't win state in this tournament, just because that's the way it's always been. But with the introduction of the team state duels, I think we have the unique opportunity to focus on the individuals, which is what it's supposed to be about anyways. And if you watch the 5 and 6A state tournament, I mean, come on. I mean, can anybody question how great of a tournament that was? And as a fan and as a coach, it was just unreal. The matchups in even the first round, I mean, they were insane. I don't think anybody can argue that. And if you put all the divisions together, I mean, how much crazier does that get, right? I mean, I would love to see some of the 7A state champs wrestle some of the 5 and 6A state champs, right? It would be absolutely crazy. And so you would get better matchups. And another thing that you could do on top of that is kind of how Pennsylvania does, just add in another like sectional tournament. Because I know a lot of the upper echelon people would probably be worried about money. And so if you add in like a districts and then a sectionals and then a state, you still get that same revenue from those smaller schools. And then you also incorporate, this is one division. And like I said, I've been talking about this for years, so I'm never going to get off the boat because like I said, I'm young, I know, but and I might have some crazy ideas, just like I think all wrestling should be freestyle and Greco. But hey, I mean, we should definitely be one individual. I mean, California does it great. At least 2. I mean, maybe 2. I mean, once again, we got to focus on the individuals and not necessarily on the teams. Like, I don't care obviously I do care if my team wins a state title, but I would rather have my individuals win their state titles and accomplish their goals and go to college and, than worry about my team's not going to college, right? So it's like, it is what it is.
I think that's actually a really interesting thought about making all high school freestyle. Because I've definitely
that one's a little – I think every year we kind of dive closer though, right? Like we're talking about adding in a step-out rule. We're talking about, changing riding time or changing a 3-point takedown. It's like, well, instead of doing all of that, why don't we just wrestle freestyle and wrestle freestyle and Greco from, when they're little? I think we'd produce more Olympians and better Olympians. Not that we don't already, but you know what I mean? It's just It doesn't make sense why we just added in another – style, which once again, I love freestyle. Don't get me wrong. I was a much better folk style wrestler, but I love it more. I mean, it's more fun. And you've wrestled freestyle and Greco. I mean, it's way more fun than folk style wrestling is. It's just
folk style's a battle, and I would say freestyle is more finesse.
100%. And as somebody that was long and lanky, I could not finesse to say. That's why I was a 4-time blood rounder. That's in freestyle and Greco. That's why I never All-American.
And so my next question is, do you think that athletes should be able to go to their club in season?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think high school coaches should be able to run a club. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, it just, once again, I'm very vocal. That's probably why I'm very controversial, but no, 100%. I don't understand why they wouldn't be able to. I think they made rules for other sports and we just kind of adopted those rules. And I just think that's stupid. I mean, not to not mince words. I think that's kind of stupid how we have to abide by all these, AA baseball, AAU basketball rules when it's like the only way we're going to grow wrestling is if we have great coaches that can coach year round. And, if you're prohibiting, like, for instance, myself, like I can't coach a club. It's like, so I only get to work with my athletes from, middle of, for the end of the year till February. And then that's it. And it's like, I think sometimes that, I wish I just had more time to work with all of these kids because 2 hours a week is not going to do anything. You know what I mean? Especially when these kids haven't wrestled for years and years and years. And that's just, so it definitely hurts smaller schools, in my opinion, that club coaches or that kids can't go to clubs year round. And I know the argument is like, oh, why would this small school doesn't have access to a club? But it's like, I had to drive 2.5 hours to my club. I drove myself, I would drive 2.5 hours, wrestle 2 hours, and then drive 2.5 hours back home. And it's like, I understand the sacrifices that go into that. And some kids will do that. I think clubs give you more access, and more access is better. And even if I don't know why anybody would argue against it, to be honest.
I think you're right. I think people are very like, well, if they don't have the access, you can't. So I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, I think clubs inherently give more access, right? Like that's the whole idea is like you can wrestle year round. You can do this whenever, right? I think that's the whole idea of a club. And so for you to like make rules because of other sports, it just doesn't make any sense. Now I get the other sports, I understand, but for wrestling, come on, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, and a bunch of these small school state champions go to clubs in the off season. So it's like all those kids, would they have been as successful if they just had to, you know what I mean? It just doesn't make any sense to me, at least. Maybe I'm in the minority in that, but.
So actually, my next question is going to be kind of give an interesting perspective on it since you're from, you've trained over in PA, but like, do you have any good ideas on how we should grow girls wrestling in state faster? Obviously, we've grown it immensely this year. We had our first Alabama State Girls Championship. Not sanctioned yet. We're still hoping for that. But do you have any good ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I sat down with a couple club coaches, and I'm not going to say names just to not out them, but I think the biggest thing that Alabama can do and you can do to help grow wrestling is to use it almost like a YouTuber uses his YouTube. You really have to promote, and you have to use modern promotion tactics, right? We are not in the era of giving out pamphlets and stuff. You have to make videos. You have to show techniques. You have to go and use your platform as a high school coach or as whatever, and go out to these people and use these videos to promote it. And, something like Flow Sports does, where they go through and do the behind the scenes and all this stuff. That's great. That's great promotion for our sport. And just, you have to, the problem is that ignorance is bliss, right? And so when we're looking at girls wrestling, a lot of girls don't know that there are wrestling, right, in Alabama. Like, they just don't know that it's there. We have the athletes, right? I mean, we have crazy amount of talented athletes in Alabama. They just don't know that it's there. And I see this all the time at Jemison too, where my athletes, they might be superstar basketball and football players, and they just have never heard about wrestling. And so by the time they know what it is, then they only have a limited time to do it. So you really have to, as Alabama, we have to do a better job of promoting our sport to every single middle school, every single elementary school, whether that's printing out 1,000 flyers and personally handing them to teachers to give to their classes, and just try to garner more interest in what we're doing, And I think the biggest thing, like I said, though, is just using your social media platforms to promote the sport and making videos, making technique videos, making overview videos, making rules videos where you go over, like, here's how a takedown is scored, or here is this, I mean, even things such as that, we're just going to do a great job. And shout out to the guys at Matt Burns, because I think, between you and them, I think you guys are doing an excellent job at promoting the sport and getting people talking about it and interested in it. And I think it's only going to grow if we all do our part and try to and help it, right?
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny that you mentioned Matt Byrne because I was talking to – he's still going to be Coach Allen to me, but I was talking to Coach Allen. I was like, see, I shout out you guys on my page all the time. So, you know, here's some proof.
help out a little bit, you know. I'll tell Scott he needs to help you out a little bit. But they're doing a great job. And I think I love the going to events. If they could go to the events and you know, obviously they're only a small crew, but if we can get people to help them out and let them come to their events and maybe even get their own commentary and stuff, you know, just to cover dual meets or like, you know, I think they covered the Vestavia Thompson dual meet. Am I correct in saying that? Or they covered somebody's dual meet.
I think so.
But it's just, and I know they covered the Alabama State girls tournament. Things like that are absolutely massive, you know, because you saw the Alabama girls state tournament. There were a ton of people there. And, you know, getting it to be like, oh, there's a lot of people that are interested in this. There's a lot of people that do this. I think that would kind of break some barriers if we get more companies like that or people like that that are really invested, that want to go travel and cover this sport. So not only for girls wrestling, but for guys wrestling too. You know, we need people to go out and do that stuff. We need people just covering the sport. I mean, that's what wrestling needs in general. We need ESPN features, right? I'm tired of seeing Roman Bravo do the little cartwheel thing, right? We need more clips. I mean, there's a ton of crazy techniques, right, that are out there, and not to discredit his because that was absolutely insane, but let's have a little more coverage instead of just getting the NCAAs once a year. How about we cover some duels, you know?
Definitely.
We're going to cover cricket and all the others. I mean, come on. Give wrestling a little bit.
Definitely. Well, Coach, before I let you go, is there anything you want to say to my viewers?
Yeah, I just want to say go Edinboro, go Jags, and keep wrestling, man. It's coming up on freestyle season right now. So if you're not on the mat and you're not doing things to get better, you're wasting time, right? So focus on what you guys need to do this summer, man. I can't wait to start next season already. So thank you so much for this interview, and yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Coach, and thank you all you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay cool out there in wrestling.